I'm reminded of a little speech I heard the other night at a theater. It happened to be off Broadway, but it was hilarious. And the playwright introduced his play this way. What I'm going to tell you is the unvarnished, verbatim truth. Some fantasy I have about what actually happened, and some downright goddamn lies. I don't know how much of that covers what we're going to say about you, Larry, but it is your night. And I'm going to change the order a little bit. Each of you have a program in front of you. And because of events that have happened, instead of the distinguished David Silverman leading us off, I'm going to ask the distinguished Roy Speckhard for obvious reasons. We're not sure how long Roy was going to be with us. And at least in terms of physically wanting to be here. All right. And then if you would, each of you, come forth and give you a little small speech of whatever, 3-4 minutes here, and that way Chuck can record you easier. So when Roy's done, David, if you would lead, and then everybody follow. And hopefully
checked okay for a few minutes. I got to know Larry Jones actually during the Coalition for Community of Reason meetings that we had. That a few of you were all along with those, August and Herb and a couple others perhaps, for many years. And those were basically gatherings in various cities around the country of one or two leaders from the national non-theist organizations to see if we might be able to get to work together. And Larry Jones represented the Institute for Humanist Studies and was really a voice for cooperation in a way that I think that was well heard by others. In fact, I think during my time there, seeing Larry operate in these meetings and then afterward, in dinner and the bar too, was a chance for me to see good, honest leadership skills modeled. And the Institute for Humanist Studies, for those of you who remember, and those of you who don't, it started off as a think tank, and it employed one of the first researchers, solid researchers in our movement, one of the first lobbyists in our movement, out of Albany, New York, where it was headquartered. And but there was a hotbed for good ideas, and Larry and co were happy to put good ideas into action when they had them. And so publications like the Humanist Network News, one of the first e-zines, and very successful, came out of that, as well as a great podcast and online coursework, the Continuum on Humanist Education. Lots of activity came out of there, and I was always looking forward and excited to hear the new things going on in Albany. So it wasn't a surprise to me, to anybody really, when members of the American Humanist Association kept clamoring to say, AHA should have its own e-zine, it should have its own podcast, it should do this and that and the other. I didn't recreate the wheel, but I called Larry and we had some good conversations about what we might do to bring those elements under the AHA umbrella and allow IHS to focus really on the vision of an academically high-quality think tank, and which has happened. I think all of this has been quite successful looking back at it. You'll probably hear more from others talk about some of the individual items, but the Continuum on Humanist Education, for instance, I know is thriving with the Humanist Institute and is expanded and is reaching hundreds of students a month, and the podcast is now run by Todd Stiefel and Kimberly Ellington as co-hosts in North Carolina, and has reached threefold the audience, over 10,000 or so now. And the Humanist Network News, with the capable editorship of Maggie Oriente, is doing very well as well. I think it has the highest subscription of anything in the movement right now, with it going out to 44,000 people directly in the last issue. So that's good. I think that you'll hear talked further about it, of course, but Larry was founder, president of the Institute for Humanist Studies, has been involved in a significant way in the founding of the Secular Coalition for America, which I gather Herb will talk about, and was instrumental, I think, in the growth of other organizations in our movement, Secular Student Alliance, Camp Class, groups like Center for Inquiry, the thriving of the International Humanist and Ethical Union. I think that there's been not quite the recognition of the incredible impact that Larry has had before, and I think that's why tonight is so important to me that I'm here right now, even if I'm not quite 100%. And I think one of the most important things that Larry has given us is the leadership that he has provided. He's, by example and by his involvement, he's showed us how we can work together, how we can operate, modeled for us what is the right way, and we've tried our best to pay attention and repeat, and I think the good things that are happening in our movement as a result. And then, but Larry's contributions financially are also worth mentioning, because they're big, and they're supportive, and they made a huge difference. When I think about how small our movement is, I've probably gotten to know most of the folks out there who've, maybe, at least many of them, who've given in the 5-figure range over the course of their involvement. And that, I think, has made the difference and put humanism on the map, has made our movement stronger. I think there's a smaller number, a couple of here today, whose contributions have reached into the 6-figure realm. And I think that has helped us to take on new programs and new ideas. And there's been a handful of folks over the years whose contributions have been in the 7 figures and have an enormous impact. And then there's one individual I know whose contributions are so significant that they approach the 8 figures, and that person is Larry Jones. And it takes hundreds of thousands of people working together, cooperating, striving to make things better in order for our movement to be successful as it has become. But there are a few individuals without whom we would not be here today. And for years, Larry, you've been that person for humanism. Thank you.
After all, my privilege here today to stand with all of my colleagues and friends to celebrate the success of Larry Jones. Now, I'm going to start tonight with a poem. It's one of my favorites from years past, originally written by Elizabeth Ann Stanley. This poem is one of those little poems that really stuck with me through my formative years, and it truly influenced my attitude toward what success and life really means. To live well, to laugh often, to love much, to gain the respect of intelligent people, to win the love of little children, to fill one's niche and accomplish one's task, to live the world better than one finds it, whether an improved flower, a perfect poem, or another life ennobled, to never lack appreciation of Earth's beauty, or to fail to express it, to always look for the best in others, to give the best one has, to make one's life an inspiration and one's memory a benediction. That is success. A lot of people think that's a Ralph Waldo Emerson poem. It was originally written by Elizabeth Ann Stanley, and I love that poem. I first read it, I loved it. And though I'm no poet, I've taken an opportunity to write my own verse for Larry for tonight. To thrive and to help others thrive. To have and to give. To see bad and fight for good, whether it be with a sword or a picket sign or a raised fist or a checkbook. To see opportunity for good and to help nourish that opportunity so that good blooms, thrives, and grows. To influence others to do the same, following in your huge footsteps, standing on your giant shoulders. Good creating good, good helping good, good leading good. To know that you're not just impacting your own life or the lives of a few, but the lives of countless others, and that years or generations from now, people will be living lives better than they would have if not for the foundation that you laid and the example that you set. This is not only success. This is successful activism. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm standing with you to honor Larry, and it is my honor. because he has done so much for so many for so long. We, the diverse atheism movement, stand where we are today because people like Larry helped make it happen over and over again when nobody else would or could. Larry is one of the reasons our movement is strong and growing. Larry is one of the reasons we have donors following in his footsteps and standing on his shoulders. I have no faith in God's, but Larry is one of the reasons I am filled with faith in our movement and its future. So Larry, I stand here today in your shadow, in your honor, for the simple purpose of thanking you for everything you've done. But everything you've done is not simply writing checks or attending meetings. It's supporting where there were few supporters, leading where there were few to follow, and persisting year after year in the face of seemingly unbeatable foes. You are the trendsetter. You are the leader, the influencer, and yes, the visionary who helped the fledgling movement get off the ground when nobody else was looking. In other words, you, Larry, are not just successful. You totally kick ass. So, on behalf of the staff, members, and board of American Atheists, I want to thank you for all of the everything you've done. Thank you.
I'm the junior Silverman. I'm the senior Silverman.
That's right, I put in first.
You know, in a previous century, several national secular leaders, including Larry Jones, sat down together for the first time to talk about issues of common concern. We called our group, as Roy mentioned, the Coalition for the Community of Reason. These organizational leaders agreed on cultural and political goals, but they couldn't quite agree on how to cooperate. They all appreciated the philanthropic efforts of Larry, whose Institute for Humanist Studies awarded starter grants to humanist and atheist organizations that had worthwhile proposals. But these CCR organizations still had irreconcilable differences. Some favored continuing an informal alliance of leaders to discuss their concerns, but others, like Larry, pushed for a more structured model working in a visible and activist coalition. Because of these disagreements, the Coalition for the Community of Reason ended in 2002. But 3 of these organizations were unwilling to give up. With Larry's help and guidance, the IHS, Atheist Alliance, and the Internet Infidels formed the Secular Coalition for America, joined shortly by the 4th organization, the Secular Students Alliance. Our fledgling coalition hoped to raise enough money to hire the first Washington lobbyist for secular causes. Here's how Larry turned our dreams into reality. He invited a few humanist and atheist leaders to his house on Martha's Vineyard to talk about our goals. He also invited a number of potential donors who believed in those same goals. Larry then gave an inspiring speech about the importance of putting our money where our mouths are if we hope to achieve change in our culture. Larry finished his speech by pledging $10,000 to the Secular Coalition for America and urged everyone else who could to do likewise. Woody Kaplan pledged $10,000. Lou Appignani pledged $10,000. I got so caught up in the excitement that I pledged $10,000. But the money raised that weekend became a game changer. The $10,000 angel meme that Larry started brought in a lot more angels who contribute $10,000 or more every year. These same generous donors who followed Larry's lead now give to a number of individual secular organizations and their causes. Larry, at that time, also suggested to those donors at Martha's Vineyard that they contribute only to the cooperative humanist and atheist organizations, which he named, and not to those who are mostly competing with one another, which he also named. Call it coincidence or providence, but shortly thereafter, the secular coalition grew from 4 to 11 national member organizations, and today has more political and cultural influence than most of us ever thought possible. Well, it's no coincidence, and it's definitely not providence. It's Larry. Thank you, Larry, for your vision and for all you do in helping our humanist and atheist organizations.
All this, right, Chuck?
So I think it would be cliche to say that without Larry Jones, Camp Quest wouldn't exist. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure if it would be true. It's possible that Camp Quest would exist without Larry, but if it did, it would be almost unrecognizably different. Camp Quest without Larry, if it still existed today, would likely be one camp session in Ohio with 40 campers. Instead, in 2013, Camp Quest served more than 850 campers at 17 different week-long sessions. Larry, through the Institute for Humanist Studies, funded startup grants that provided the seed money for Camp Quest's very first expansion efforts, starting with Camp Quest Smoky Mountains in 2002. They had 6 campers that year. This year, they had 53 campers. In 2006, Larry was one of the original people who encouraged Camp Quest to form a national organization to support and connect our camps together and help new camps launch. At that time, we had 6 camp locations around North America, but they were barely in touch with each other, and there wasn't even a shared website that listed them all. In 2007, Larry and the Institute for Humanist Studies welcomed us into their home. We moved into the IHS offices, which at the time were in Albany, New York. And it's a really big step for a small organization to move into an office. It makes you believe that you're a real organization. From those offices, we applied for the IHS grant that took Camp Quest down the path of growth that we've been on for the last 6+ years. During my more than 10-year history with Camp Quest, Larry has been a steadfast supporter. In addition to providing the impetus and funding that allowed Camp Quest to make the leap from one local project to a national force in the free thought movement, and continuing to support us year after year, Larry helped me believe that this project was possible. At the time, I was a 26-year-old graduate student, volunteer president of the Camp Quest Ohio board, and I had no idea how to write a grant proposal, let alone be an executive director. Without a mentor like Larry, it's unlikely that I would have been willing to take this on. It may seem odd to talk about faith at a humanist gathering honoring a humanist visionary and philanthropist, but I think one of the qualities that has made Larry such an amazing force in this movement is his faith in people. He believes that we can work hard and we can work together to make the world a better, more humane, and more humanistic place. And he makes that possible through mentoring people and funding projects that are new and struggling to get on their feet. As Herb already talked about Secular Coalition for America, I'm the vice president of the Secular Coalition for America right now. I was at that meeting in 2004, and it was so inspiring to see what happened there. we had never had a lobbyist in Washington for atheists and humanists. No one knew if that would work, if that was even possible. But Larry believed in that vision, and he believed in the people involved, and he got other people to believe in that vision too. So if you look at the landscape of the humanist movement today, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an organization that Larry hasn't been there for. From launching an innovative new organization or project, to providing the steady support that keeps movements running, humanism without Larry would exist. But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it would be almost unrecognizably different. It would be smaller, it would be less diverse, it would be less effective, and it would be less innovative. Instead, it's my great honor to be a part of the flourishing and vibrant humanist movement that Larry has fostered, and my great joy to be able to share my gratitude for his work with all of you.
I'm really shocked that we made it this far into the program without anybody mentioning Harry Truman. And the quote about it's amazing how much you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit, which I think that speaks so much of Larry. Unlike Amanda, I can say with as much certainty as is possible in affairs that involve human beings that the Secular Student Alliance would not be around today if it were not for Larry. I once heard an atheist activist who was excited to see more atheists get involved in politics talk about how, she knew there was Emily's List to help women get involved in politics, but maybe someday there would be Madeline's List to help atheists get involved in politics, referencing, of course, Madeleine Murray O'Hair. What that activist didn't know is that Emily's List isn't about a person, it's actually an acronym, and it stands for Early Money is Like Yeast. So, this is certainly something that Larry has taken to heart, and Larry's belief that new startups in our movement could change the whole movement has been borne out. Herb and Amanda have talked about the Secular Coalition and Camp Quest and how very, very different they would be without Larry's support. Knowing that our movement needed new ideas was key to Larry's vision and Larry's moving our movement forward. Nonetheless, I'm not about to start calling Larry Emily just yet, because Larry knew that early money wasn't enough. He was sophisticated enough to understand that the current state of humanism and moving it forward, to move forward the current state of humanism, that he might have to bring more to the kitchen than yeast to make humanism rise. And that Larry was open to the possibility of giving guidance and additional financial support. In 2000, the Secular Student Alliance was a ragtag bunch of young people who believed that the student wing of our movement was too important to belong to one label or to just be a project of one organization. And we were right about how important the student wing of the movement was. We were wrong about our ability to actually move forward that wing. In the year 2000, IHS gave a grant to the Secular Student Alliance. And in 2001, they called us up and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I said, "Well, there's some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that we haven't actually done much yet, but the good news is that we haven't spent very much of your money." They were kind of pleased. They said, "Okay, well, that's good, ish. You've got two options. One, you can just write us a check for the remaining amount of money and no harm, no foul. But if you want to keep trying, we can send you out some help and try to get you better organized." And we chose the help. And with IHS's guidance, we started getting more done. And in 2003, with more support from the IHS, we hired our first campus organizer. And our big, hairy, audacious goal at the time was to get 250 campus groups. And I have to tell you, from 2003, where we had like maybe 40-ish campus groups, 250 campuses seemed more like, well, not really a goal that we might actually like reach someday, but just this sort of crazy number we put out there so we would have a direction, and that we maybe keep growing towards that forever and ever. And of course today, the Secular Student Alliance has over 390 campus groups around the country. We would have never made that transition between the ragtag bunch of students with a lot of vision and the professional organization without Larry's support, both financially and organizationally. The secular student movement is flourishing today, and this condition was far from inevitable. In fact, it was highly evitable. It could have been otherwise, and it would have been otherwise without Larry believing that a small group of activists could push forward their vision, and that it was okay to suggest to them that they could use a little help when things didn't go perfectly the first time. So Larry, thank you for empowering me, and indeed empowering everybody in this room to help change the world, and I think today at least, you do get some credit. So thank you very much, Larry. And it's my pleasure to introduce Kristen Wintermute.
Oh, thank you. Larry Jones. I saw Johnny Depp today. It was totally cool. I did. I saw Johnny Depp today. So it was a big celebrity sighting, which I texted my daughter, and she said, no way. So to get down to business, Larry Jones, as everybody has talked about, had the foresight as a visionary to see that online education was where things were going. And if you think about the University of Phoenix and Coursera, this is where universities are going. And so Larry gave us the online education, which was built by August. 2 years in the making, content management system, thank you, August, which we took apart and put into WordPress, sorry. But Larry's foresight allowed us to globally reach people in basic topics of humanism. And I'll tell you, today, 800 people and above are registered for these courses. And there are people in Sri Lanka, Singapore, New Zealand, Biloxi, Mississippi. We are reaching people all over the country. This isn't Chicago, this isn't New York. These are people striving to understand humanism, and Larry made this happen. He had the foresight to forge ahead and do online courses. And where we are with this today is we are providing humanist celebrant training, which we didn't have training. We weren't training our celebrants. We can now reach our celebrants all over the country. We are actually partnering with the Institute for Humanist Studies, which Larry, thank you, has taken on our think tank, and Tony is forging ahead, and we're partnering with the Institute for Humanist Studies, and the fellows each year are going to provide us with an online course on contemporary thought. And the first one is almost done. Thank you, Monica Miller. Does anyone know who Monica Miller is?
Will.
Yeah, you will. She is a dynamic professor in the making, and she's writing a course for us on humanism and pop culture. So it's huge. And we could not be doing this without Larry, without having the foresight to have this platform. And we want to just thank you immensely for handing over this gift, which we are expanding and developing, and just thank you very much.
I want to first say that Larry's commitment to fostering good thinking and productive action has helped not only with respect to organizations but individuals as well. That it's provided a space for people like me. I'm a humanist and an academic who is desperately looking for ways to be involved that allowed me to hold those two things together. And the Institute for Humanist Studies provided that sort of opportunity. And I would say that many of the other opportunities that I cherish that have come along in recent years have been a result of the honor of being involved with the Institute for Humanist Studies. A few years back, Larry was kind enough to spend some time with me. He invited me to his home not far from here, and we chatted over a cup of coffee. I wanted to learn more about the history of the Institute, but we also had an opportunity to speak briefly about some of the goals and the vision for the Institute. I'd like to use just the next few minutes to continue that conversation with Larry. Because I'm hoping that you'll find in the efforts that we're making, the things we're trying to accomplish, something of what you had in mind. We gave you, I think, one copy already, but I wanted to make certain that you had both the paperback and the hard cover. It was years in the making, but finally the first book from the Institute came out, and we couldn't think of a better way to start this text than to dedicate it to the man who made this possible. So I've got these copies for you. In addition to that, we do have this book series, and we have an opportunity now to rethink the book series in what is a significant way, to rethink the book series in a way that will link us to the academic division of one of the big 5 publishing houses. So we'll have a much more substantial reach. We'll have a U.S. market, but this will give us an opportunity as well to gain greater visibility outside of North America. First book is out. The second book on humanism and public policy will go to press in roughly a month, and the third volume, Everyday Humanism, will follow shortly thereafter. We've also partnered with AHA on this journal, and the journal, Essays in Philosophy of Humanism, will be published by Equinox, which will kind of free us up to think the big ideas and not have to worry so much about the actual nuts and bolts of production. They will help with distribution both in the United States and Europe. It's a big deal for us, and it will give us a significant type of reach. We are interested, as you suggested, we ought to be interested in expansive conversation. So we have every year a symposium. The first symposium meeting took place on the Columbia University campus. The second meeting took place on a campus I think is a little better, Rice University's campus. First meeting gave us an opportunity to kind of think broadly about the very nature and meaning of humanism, what we should be thinking about, to step back and kind of think deeply about the nature and meaning of humanism. The second gave us an opportunity to think in terms of humanism and public policy. We will meet again on the Rice campus in a couple of months. The weather will be beautiful. I can almost promise you that. The weather will be beautiful, and during that conversation, we'll think through the ways in which humanists ought to interact with the non-humanist world. We've tried very hard to make certain that the conversation has a certain type of U.S. tone, but also takes into consideration our European colleagues and comrades. So this meeting, we will be bringing to the conversation 2 scholars from Germany. This also gives us an opportunity for robust partnerships with the like-minded elsewhere. So in conversation now with one of the participants in the November meeting, Professor Dr. Jürgen Mannemann, who is the director of the Institute for Philosophical Research in Hanover. It's a big deal for them. This is philosophical think tank that kind of reaches within public policy. So business and political leaders turn to this institute for insights on how they ought to be thinking about issues of morality and ethics. And so we'll be able to engage them in conversation as well. So we're trying very hard to do the good work, to promote good thinking, and to provide resources for proper action. And Larry, we do this because of the groundwork you've laid. Thank you so much.
Well, Larry, there weren't too many damn lies from what I could tell. It sounded like it was mostly verbatim. And if you would come forth, assuming I can get this open. There we go. Okay. Please.
Oh my God, how am I going?
This is actually, I'll read it. It is dated 2013, which is good, we got the year right. The Institute for Humanist Studies presents this award to Larry Jones, our founder, in recognition and appreciation of your dedicated support of the humanist movement for over 20 years. And there's our little logo on there. So
Thank you.
that is yours. And I'd like to give you the floor.
All right.
For however long you'd like to have it.
Oh, really?
No hook. And then I'll come whenever you'd like to be done.
All right, well, good evening. And thank you all very much for coming tonight. I'd like to especially thank the speakers who said all those wonderful things about me, some of which I'll admit to. But I want to accept this honor, really, on behalf and for the wonderful people I had working for me at IHS. They were a exuberant, talented, and innovative group of people. And they're the ones who created IHS, really. It's very gratifying to hear that IHS had an impact on humanism. I really meant IHS to live a little longer than it did. It had a short life. And of course, one of the interesting, perhaps instructive questions for humanists is, why did IHS fail? Why didn't it continue on? We had dynamic people working for us. We had bold and innovative programs, which you all have mentioned. And yet we didn't get the support we really needed from the humanist movement. And it's, I bring this up because it's an instructive and interesting question, because it goes to the heart of what humanists will support and what humanists won't support, what works and what doesn't work. One of our most successful and flagship programs was the grant program, the IHS grant program. And of course, this was giving away money, and that's always popular. But this money came from a donor advised fund from the Jones family, and it was impossible for IHS to use that money itself because of my connection to IHS and this donor advised fund. But the amount of this money was about $100,000 a year, my share of it, to distribute to charities of my choice. Of course, I picked IHS, but it couldn't be used for IHS, so we separated it, that money, into the IHS grant fund. And it even had its own board of directors, its own committee. We call it the committee. And this committee was made up of people who really knew the movement, who knew the players, who knew who was doing good work and who was doing bad work and no work at all. And their job was to do the research on the grant proposals that came into us and distribute the money on a basis of merit. And I really thought this would be an ideal vehicle for for humanist donors of all levels, but especially wealthy humanist donors who perhaps didn't know where to put their money, didn't know what groups to support, didn't know what programs to support. But here was the IHS grant program that did all the work for them. So I envision this grant fund to grow from this $100,000 that I had access to perhaps $1 million a year. It wouldn't take that many people. And think what the humanist organizations could do with $1 million a year. But we didn't get any interest in that. It didn't seem to work, and I'm not sure why. We did get one contribution. Lou Appignani gave a contribution to the IHS grant fund. But similarly, the IHS proper didn't seem to attract the funding that I thought we would, because I thought IHS would last far beyond me. I built it for it to do that. But we were lucky, to get 25% of our budget financed by outside donors. So this was a huge loss, and it was unsustainable. And in 2009, I had to close, with great sorrow, the Institute. But I think this question of why it failed is of value and should be considered by the humanist movement. And I'm not sure what the answer is. Some people came to me and said, well, Larry, you didn't do enough market research. But, when you're selling ideas, when you're selling programs, it's hard to get meaningful feedback on market research on those items. If you're selling a widget or something, it's you can get more meaningful feedback. So I don't know if we could have done anything more there. And then people said, well, you gave away money, Larry, and people don't think you need money if you give it away. And we had leaned over backwards to explain what the donor advised fund limitations were, and how this money could not go to IHS, and it could only go to this grant fund. But we didn't get the support, and it was a disappointment to me that IHS failed. But I'm so glad to hear, I'm so gratified to hear that IHS did have an impact on humanism. And I believe that's true. And I think humanist historians will look back upon this era, the first decade of the 21st century, and see a little blip in the fortunes of humanism, and that is IHS. And I'm proud of that. And, thank you very much. I don't know if we have time to discuss. I'd like to get feedback of why you think IHS failed. I have some ideas. I think that humanism has been plagued by a low expectation of humanists. The humanist movement has been plagued by a low expectation. And it may be because we're just overwhelmed with the religious majority. Maybe humanists think that we can't do, a minority just can't do anything, can't make changes. So this low expectation is reflected in a low donor contribution. And I think even high performance is not rewarded by low expectations. It takes time to build expectations. I think the problem with IHS, and I'd like to get your feedback, if not now, in the future, I think the problem was we got out in front of our constituency too far. Humanism wasn't ready to give that kind of money to support that kind of organization because they were of this history of low expectation. And I think if humanism can build that expectation to a higher level, they will be able to support an organization like IHS. I think we did have a contribution to make, and even though it was short-lived, I think it was worthwhile. I don't regret a minute of it. I worked with wonderful people at IHS. It was the kind of the high point of my life to work with these people. I was able to travel to all over the world, really, to India, to Nepal, to Africa. By the way, I travel on my own dime. I didn't use IHS money. But it was such an interesting experience. It was a high point of my life. And it was the most meaningful point of my life. And hopefully in the future, humanism will be able to support such a organization as IHS. I guess I've talked long enough now. I'd like to thank you again all for coming here. And I'd like to thank Warren for and his board for and IHS for organizing this event and allowing me to speak about IHS. I know out of the ashes has come a new IHS, and that's gratifying. And I hope Warren has taken the new IHS on a different path, and I hope it's a path that humanism can support. And I wish the new IHS all the success. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce Jenny in just a moment. I don't know if there's any. I think I often have these conversations with Larry. And to me, it was a big struggle. And what I heard tonight was a lot of successes, Larry, that came out of a lot of that struggle. And I think that the problem, I think all of us that work in the progressive field, wherever it is interesting. You have to look back. I was talking to some of my friends and things like the LGBT movement, the civil rights movement. I mean, you go back 50 years and you suddenly realize, my goodness, these little things began, and I think IHS was one of those ones. It's more than a blip. I think it was a little bit of an expansion. And we're hoping with the new IHS, we're operating on a lot different budget parameters, but we think we can lay an intellectual base. Anyway, I'm not going to say a whole lot more. I just feel I think you should feel a little better about it. But I know that everybody always likes to have the home run. And sometimes all we can do is bunt temporarily and go to first base and hope you can steal second and go on. So that's where I think we're at. Jenny, would you like to wrap up with us, please?
Thank you. Well, we've all thanked Larry tonight, and there were some very eloquent words spoken, but we all know the best way to thank Larry is to try to emulate him. That imitation is the highest form of flattery. Now, none of us are seven-figure able. However, pledge cards will be going around, and I'm going to steal from Woody Kaplan. and ask you tonight to give until it feels good. We believe in this movement. Larry Jones laid the groundwork. He started all of this wonderful energy that has blossomed into a fully diverse and powerful movement. Now, the new IHS that has risen out of the ashes, we have a more focused mission. We want to be the think tank that provides the intellectual foundation that other organizations can turn to when they want that scholarly, fact-based information at their disposal. We want to be the go-to source for that information and that scholarly research. If you believe in that mission too, please thank Larry Jones by imitating him if you can. Thank you.